Hello everyone, this is Beatnologic again, coming at you with another video. And as I always say, because it tends to be that way with me somehow, it seems. Again, a different video from what you've normally seen, maybe, I hope so at least. And let's get started, because as you already have seen, the title of this video is Our Parents Are Dying. And I decided because I wanted to talk about this topic. Of course, you have to be of a certain age for this to be true. So if you're younger than this or older than this doesn't apply to you. But I'm talking about the people in my generation, the people who are 40 plus, the people whose parents are now 60 to 70 years old. They are dying. So I wanted to do this video to talk about like what that means on the bigger scale, because most of us wouldn't care unless it was literally our parents. But if you only think of it in that kind of way, then you're missing the bigger picture, because there is a bigger picture basically. And I'll try to do my best and cover the basis that I think needs to be mentioned. And I based this idea also on the fact that I had this guy that I knew. I don't want to call him a friend because we used to be friends, but then turned out, as been my experience many times in life, to call someone a friend, it actually has to include them actually being your friend. So if someone doesn't live up to that, then I will stop referring to people like that. But anyway, that's besides the point, because I gotta give credit due where it is due, you know. So this guy brought up a very important point. How what's happening now on the larger scale, if you will. Of course, not. I don't know, like how deep one is supposed to go on that, because that's up to you. You can take it as long as you want, but I'll keep it as simple as I can for my part. I won't take it too far in a sense, but yes, there is a bigger picture. But let's start with the one that's more common to the most of us. And as I said before, most of us don't think about this unless it was our parents actually dying, you know. Then it would take on a very different meaning indeed, because it would mean that someone in our family was not going to be around anymore, and dealing with all of that comes with that. But for one, as I addressed that particular point, in my case it would have an even bigger implication, because I am in a different situation than most people my age. So for me personally, that would mean there's one less source of aid in a way, because as I've said before, I am unfortunately dependent on the system, and the system is not perfect. So what having parents to me also includes, except for all the other things about having parents, is the fact that you have someone in your life that you can turn to if there's a problem of some kind, not only financial but also emotional support, you know, whatever, someone to talk to, ask for advice, whatever, you know, all those things. And then on top of that, financial support if you need it, given situation, you know. But here's the thing that brought me to, because like this guy, like I said, this friend of mine, this acquaintance, whatever you call it, he were like out of nowhere coming to this point, and I wish like so many times that I had remembered the context exactly. I really wish I did, because we were just talking back and forth about various things, and for some reason we must have touched on the topic of parents. And the thing is, without me having actually mentioned anything specific towards that direction that he ended up going, he said this, and I'll quote, they are waiting for our parents to die. And if you're the kind of person who asks, who are they? Then you need to leave this video immediately, because if you don't understand what I'm talking about, you might as well just get on out of here immediately, because then this video is not for you. But if you do get what I'm saying, because of course I could have asked the same question when he said this. I could have said, who is they? But I already know who they are. Like, I don't know them as in being able to name them by name, but I know that there's an agenda. I know that certain people are streamlining society in a certain way to fit their needs. But like I said, that to me in this point in time, that's a whole other topic of discussion. That's not what this video is about. But the point is the fact that this guy said this. It eventually led me here, sitting here recording this video. And as of now, I don't even know how the sound is going to turn out, but we'll see. I hope it's going to be okay, and if that's the case, then I don't need to use the headsets, because one of them is not working properly and the other one does, but still, doing this through a phone is a problem. I wish I had a proper camera so I could do this properly. I really do, but anyway, that's besides the point too. When this guy said this, since then, not only at the time, but even after that, I've been thinking about this topic quite a bit. Because what does this mean? Like, not this whole part about them and they, but what does that statement mean in a way? Like, how would that affect us? Because he's not talking, and this is a man, I gotta point out to you, was a man who said this that actually has lost his parents already. So I knew he wasn't talking about himself. So he was talking about something in the bigger picture, if you will, which is obvious. But later on, of course, as more things happened, I don't know if he was talking about that in that sense, but I got the sort of like a bigger understanding of as to why. But here's the thing. When you look at Hollywood in particular, or artists who make music, that's where you first get to see it. Like, for me, it's very evident. These are the people who belong to our parents' generation. And for me, I mean, some of them, they were exactly that generation, literally like the year my mother was born, or something like that. And they're dead now. Some of them went away quite young because of an excessive lifestyle or something. People like Jim Morrison as an example. But what I'm saying is this: now, because of age, and some of them even not even that age, some of them quite young, in fact, closer to my age, you could say, are starting to die off. Like, but first and foremost, I'm talking about the parent generation, you know, the people who are our mother and father's age. Like, what does that mean for us as a society, as a species, when they go away? And that was like the question within me that his statement sparked. And of course the second part too, like, I do tend to respond to when people bring up this agenda that's going on in the world right now, because I do find that topic interesting, no lie there. So of course I think about that as well, but in the bigger picture, and that's why I'm here talking to you, what does this mean for us? Because I look at the TV or the music scene, not that I like follow it on a regular basis or anything, but I look at it and I see, and that's another reason why I started this video, because I was watching some YouTube just now and read a few of the comments on the particular video I was watching, and it had a sound clip in it because it was about finding good vinyl records around shops for a decent price, for a, if you could say, a cheap price. And he had some finds in there, showing what he was able to pick up, and he demonstrated some of the music in there. And then, of course, in the comments, one of the clips he played was Laura Branigan, and in the comments, he played a clip from the Self-Control song, and in the comments I read that she has passed away. And she was like late 40s, early 50s. There was a little bit, I can't remember exactly, because there was a bit of discrepancy. I checked up on an article about this, and the article had basically had to correct their own original article 12 years after she, when she passed away. So, because some details were grossly misquoted. So, anyway, but that's besides the point. But she was only like 47 or 52. I don't remember which one was the correct one. That's my point. But she was my age. And then, so you can imagine the people who are then older than that, like I said, between 60 and 70 something, they are dying off right now. And so what does that mean for us as a society? Well, for me, it's a very disappointing fact, because I know the changes within generations, and in my honest opinion, and as I always say to people, not to toot my own horn or anything, but, and like I said, clearly, I want to state this very, very clearly, not to toot my own horn, because it's not about me personally, it's about a generational thing. I do believe that every generation has its qualities, if you will. But the thing is, something is changing, though. Something is changing in a very dramatic way. And where you do see it is that generational expression, if you will. Like, I mean, okay, let me put it like this. When you are this age that I am, my age bracket, it's bad enough when your grandparents die, because it's family. Okay, yes, I get that. But it's expected, because they're so old, they can't, like, when you reach a certain age, you realize, okay, they can't live forever, and neither are you. So, but then you start to see people, like, in theory, who could be your parents, and then it kind of gets a bit creepy, because for a fact it's going to happen to you as well. Your parents is going to pass away. So what happens with that is, of course, you're confronted with that in your mind, and me, thankfully, I can deal with that. I can deal with the fact that my father is already gone. He passed away when I was only 10, so that's a benefit too, I guess, in a way, because it gives me the experience, if you will, that I had to learn from a young age, that we are not, we don't live forever. So having to deal with death at a young age, it definitely prepares you for life later on. But the problem is, and again, looking aside from losing someone in your personal family, for one, the first problem I want to address with that happening is that even if there's nothing we can do about it, and and all of that. Even that is something I think my generation is going to be able to deal with. I hope so, at least. But on a personal level, of course, it's going to be difficult to deal with that. But, it is what it is. But on the larger scale, when you look at movies, when you look at music, and you see that these people are going away, they are disappearing now, dying off, then it has a different impact. And so you can say I'm talking about our parents, yeah. That's in the title, of this video, but it also entails more. Because when you start looking at movies and music, and you see that these people are going away, and sometimes even people younger than that, like I said, Laura Branigan was at the most in her very early 50s. So physically, there's a problem. Why are people dying that young? I had a friend myself who was 6. Yeah, let's see. It would be about 5 years older than me. So he was 5 years older than me, and it's already been a few years since he passed away, and he wasn't even 50. So, but as I said, Laura Branigan was like 47 or 52 because there was some error in the original article or something, and they had to go back and correct it. But the point I'm getting to is that, look, aside from the family connection that I was referring to earlier, it has an impact on a deeper level, like in society as a whole. And so what that means, and this is where the generational thing comes in, because if you do believe, and I'm not saying you do, but if you do believe in something bigger than yourself, something bigger than just being born, you live, you die, end of story, then that's what I'm talking about. Because unfortunately, and again, I'll use the phrase that Tommy coined so well, hashtag not all, but what that means on the larger scale is that there is a difference. And since I'm part of one of these generations, I used to refer to it, or I should say more correctly, grammar-wise, I usually refers to it as echo. I call it echo because it was 4 decades. 4 decades that signifies the end. I wouldn't say the end of an era, even because that's not what it is. But it's a zeitgeist. And for those of you who don't know what zeitgeist means, you see I can't talk. Zeitgeist means, it's a German word. It means the spirit of the times. Zeit meaning time, Geist meaning ghost or spirit. So it's like the spirit of the times. Those 4 decades had it, and it was given a certain expression throughout those different decades. And it goes back to the end of World War II and early 50s. That's when it started. It started with the rock and roll rebellion, or whatever you want to. I don't like the word rebellion for it, because I don't think that's what it was. I mean, revolution maybe. It was like a new thing that happened. And it's very easy to understand once you know the dynamic behind it. Like I said, I called it echo, but you can call it whatever you like because it had very distinct different expressions. But I used to call it echo. And because the echo is literally now dying. And that's what I'm talking about. Because after the Second World War, there was this great positivity. It was about rebuilding and creating something new. And those who had that spirit, and for the most part, it was a global thing. It was worldwide, and it was, of course, mainly fueled by what the Americans did, because everything, for some reason, that's how it turned out. America led on. And so by them doing that, not only through practical means, helping those nations that needed help, but also from what happened in their culture, the emerging of rock and roll and art and new ways, basically. That's where it started out, and it was this great positivity and this great sense of rebuilding and expressing, I don't know what to call it, but the artistic expression basically was a very big thing, a very big part of that. And so for me, being somewhat of a creative person myself and into arts and artistic things myself, not only enjoying them but also doing them for myself, it's something that I noticed, that there's this dynamic that have been there throughout these decades that I talk about. And so it came to these, I don't know if it's like 4 or 5 decades exactly, but the point is, my generation, we are the last part of that echo, because and this is how, because it's very basic what happened, and it's very easy to explain the technical explanation for why it fell apart when it did, why the echo, and I'm not talking about physical death now, but I'm talking about the moral death of it. Like, why is it not a reality anymore? Because, and like I said, it's very easy to pinpoint the time and the thing that happened, if you will, in society that caused this change. Why it happened? Maybe not so much. But anyway, in the late 80s, I would say, or mid 80s, yeah, maybe it's better to say mid 80s, mankind changed in a way. Some of you have heard it referred to as the yuppie age. And with the yuppie age, as I call it myself, the way I phrase it, I said it's when we stopped living in our hearts and started living in our wallets. Like, greed became a thing. That was like the death of the echo, like the death of humanity in a way. And I don't mean, like I said, please bear with me, I'm just using the terminology that I have come to use for it myself, but in a way it was the death of humanity, being a mensch, as you would say in Jewish. Mensch means human, being human towards each other, like that way of thinking. It changed when that came into play into society. And so that's why I think we're in trouble now, because yeah, you can, as I started saying before, it's bad enough when your grandparents are going away, but at the same time that's expected. In a way you can say you gotta expect to lose your parents too. But when you're part of something and you're the last generation of that, then it becomes a different story, because you know for a fact, and I'll say it again, the difference between us and the ones who comes after us is a very simple thing to explain. Because my generation, my bracket, if you will, we belong to those who were kids or teens in the 80s. The next ones, they were born in the 80s. Like, we were born in the 70s. And normally the next generation would be our kids, but it's not. Like, because that would mean you would have kids at 10 or 15 years old yourself, so that doesn't make sense. But I'm digressing here. That's not the point I'm trying to make, but just for the record, I just wanted to clarify that that's not what's happened, weirdly enough, because the next generation is not our kids. Like, generationally speaking, because I don't have kids myself, but they're not our kids. They're just a few years younger than us, but they were raised in a different way. They think in a different way. They act in a different way. And unfortunately, their parents gave them a different point of origin too, with what they gave them as what they had to go out into the world with. So there is a very clear difference. I remember it most when it came to my neighbor, who at the time I think was like 17 years old or something, where I was living at the time, and it was only like 5 years between us, I think, something like that. And he asked me if, because I'd just been to the gas station across the road and bought me something or other, and he asked me, and I had been there because I knew, okay, if I don't get that at a certain point, it's going to be closed, so I won't be able to get what I need. So I was always on time. Even if it was only like 5 minutes left, I would make sure to make that deadline so I wouldn't miss it. And of course, that particular time, I was there just before they closed. So I came back, and then my neighbor met me, and he was like, do you know any place who's open? And, because I would like some Coke, some Coca-Cola. And I was like, well, because he asked about this one that I had been to, and I said, no, that one just closed, but, there's always the one, and I mentioned the other gas station, and I said, there's always that one, and you can go there. They are open 24 hours. And he was like, oh, no, that's so far. And I just flipped on him in that sense. Not like I went for him physically or anything, but I just kind of like, in a way, lost it with him. And I just said to him, not raising my voice or anything, but I had no choice but to speak up, basically. So I said to him, you know what, then you don't want Coca-Cola that bad. That was my reply to him, because it's kind of like things like that shows you the difference between the two, like the generational thing. And like I said, it would be fine if these were our kids, like age-wise, if they were 20 years from us. But these are only like a few years from us, and it's such a major difference. So, what I'm saying, back to the parents, when you see that they are disappearing now, one, it means those of us who were lucky enough to be part of the echo, if you will, because we were alive in the age of innocence, as I call it. We were raised in that way. We had that inspiration in our lives, and all of that goes with it. Because of that, when they are dying, the ones of us that draw inspiration from that are going to have fewer idols to look up to, basically. And even more so when they're all gone, when the whole generation has died off. So that's the thing that I'm thinking about. Like, that's a thing that's going to be a problem. I mean, yeah, me and my sister and my brother, we're tic-tac-toe age-wise. Like, we're 6 years apart, roughly, from the youngest to the oldest. There's 6 years between us. But the point I'm making is that once you move beyond that, and we're gone, I fear it's going to be even worse. But anyway, I'm almost out of time here now, so let me pause this and I'll come right back on the next one. Okay, here we are again. Sorry about that. I'm going to pause shortly because holding this phone up like this is kind of difficult too. So, but anyway, I just want to finish that one point, because that example with my neighbor there, and this was years ago, back in the early 2000s, but this example with him illustrates so clearly what a major difference. And of course, he's only one person, and I'm not saying everyone in my generation is perfect, or that anyone in his generation is crap, because they're good people and bad people in both generations, if you will. But what I'm saying is, on the larger scale, his generation is very different, and it makes me worry about the future. because, like I said, and I won't go into details because I've told this story a couple of times to the people that know me, but it's to the point where it's even their own parents are lacking in the same way, even though it comes out through different expressions. And that's why I'm worried, because not only are we losing our parents, the people who are in my age bracket, but we're also losing when they are gone, and also when my generation, you see, when my generation is gone as well, that's going to be emphasized. Those shortcomings of the next bracket, because, like I said, it should normally be the kids of one generation, right? The litter of the, that's what they say when it comes to like animals like dogs. They say the litter. So if one is small, they say, oh, he's the runt of the litter. But we're not talking about some individual, and that's my point. We're not talking about some marginal percentage within a group. No, I'm talking about on a general basis. Of course, I'm generalizing too. But the point I'm making is there is a difference. And you can tell by very simple steps, like maybe you can't like devise a test to prove your point, because obviously it's like if you put a test out there and it's going to be like a standard test, leave it out there for a few years. And then eventually you're going to have cheat sheets, as you guys call it. We call them facet in my language. That's going to pop up and people are going to be able to cheat on these tests. So that wouldn't work either. But what I'm saying is this is not some small percentage, because this is about a dynamic within a group of people based on how they were raised and the time they were raised at. Again, that's why I use the word zeitgeist. Spirit of the times plays into it as well. So when you are raised in that sort of environment, and forgive me for saying so, but meaning that your parents is fucked up in some way too, and I can understand it, I really can. Don't get me wrong. The world is very much fucked up, and I understand why it's become that way in many ways. I do. But the difference is that whole generation is the one that's going to be taking over, because obviously my generation, we're too old now. So whether we like it or not, they're it. And again, I'll emphasize what I was saying before. I'm not saying that my generation is perfect or that the other generation is crap. But what I'm saying is, due to how our parents were raised and what kind of people they were, in a general sense, but also on a more personal level with you as their child, you had a better point of origin. You were better equipped in many ways. In other ways, I can say I'm not well equipped at all, because obviously my folks were poor and stuff like that. But I'm saying in terms of this, like what they had there, and in terms of what they gave their kids in terms of love, because I mean, it's hard to imagine, because some of you know what my mother is like. But even if she's like that, I have no doubt that she loves me, So that's another point, how these people were raised by their parents and then subsequently raised us, it matters. And when you come to the generation that knows nothing, and I hate to say it, because like I said, this is gonna sound, and I wish I knew why. And I'm not saying, like I said, this is not an absolute statement, because it doesn't apply to all. Hashtag not all. That's why I was referring to Tommy's phrase. Because it doesn't apply to absolutely all of them, but it does mean it applies to the majority of them. And why is that? And I just gave you an example of why I think that is. Because the time that was changing in such a dramatic way and such a bad way, to say the least, because that plays into it as well. Change in itself is not necessarily bad, but when it's a bad change, it's going to affect the people. So, of course, the people at the time got affected by it, and technology also aided them in some of the other factors, like letting your kids take care of themselves, if you will, and not so much having to raise them, really, because you stick them in front of the VCR or the TV or the computer with games. And I know I'm speaking from experience because, like I said, I'm part of the same generation. We're only a few years apart. But the difference is, back then, and yes, certain days I did exceed my computer time limit, if you will. Like, my mother didn't have any, back in those days, we didn't have any schedules like that. No one did. And that's my point, because if then you don't have the right circumstance to begin with, that's going to affect you really badly. So, thankfully for us, whether it was through some means through my mother, or it was something that was innate in us due to our upbringing, I don't know. But at least we got through it without becoming like that. And that's the point I'm making. Because those who come after us, those who are 5 to 10 years younger, they're not like that at all. Like, I did it on occasion, just like, I'll do another example. When I was 17, like my neighbor was in the other example, when I was 17, when we got drunk, because obviously 17-year-olds get drunk too, but when we did, at 17 or 18 or even 20, in those times, yeah, you can have one of those parties where you get completely out of your skull drunk once or twice a month. Yes, it could happen. But now, the kids though in those ages, now they do it every weekend. So alcohol is going to be a problem too with that generation. I'm telling you. And this is from someone who's speaking as an addict, because I am an addict, and I thankfully have been able to I don't know what to call it, but I've been able to deal with being an addict, if you will. I don't do drugs anymore, and I drink, but I drink I don't know if it's respectfully or respectable, but you know what I mean. Like, I know that this is something that's actually something you really can't play around with. It's some serious business, so you gotta respect it, But the point I'm making, look aside from, because that's, like I said, that's another thing that's going to play into it, because their casualty, no, not casualty, casual, how can you say, relationship, their casual relationship to something like alcohol is practically scary when you think about it, because that whole thinking in itself, like, and even that thinking, I know where it comes from. It's like the I'm gonna live forever kind of thinking. That's where it comes from. So, but of course, then you have the other problem. Drinking and doing drugs, if your attitude is so light-hearted towards it, if you will, then you also have the fact that this thing, doing alcohol and drugs, influences this too. So you change over time, and I know this for a fact, because when I was having that moment, like, I've had it a couple of times in my life, but I always was able to steer myself in a different direction and get back on track. But what I'm saying is, when it's a whole generation and excessively, then what? How's that going to play into things? And the attitude too, like, and don't get me started on Americans, because their attitude with that is even worse than ours. So, but whatever, I'm not going to go into that part of it, but I'm saying, as a species, this is concerning, because there is an agenda going on too in society, and us as a species, we are the only ones that can actually influence this in some kind of way. So when the people who come after us aren't properly equipped to handle that, then we are in trouble. And like I said, I wouldn't blame the generation for being what they are, but it's a problem nevertheless. And it's a problem given the agenda that I was referring to. Because as I started before, when my friend did bring up that point, like with what he said, they are waiting for our parents to die. So basically, if you take it in another way, not talking about the ones that I mentioned, the ones who are 5-10 years younger than us, the people in our 40s, late 40s, 50s, because it's from that bracket, early 40s to late 40s, early 50s, depending on, of course, what time you were born. But that's the very narrow group of people I'm talking about, because they are the last ones from these decades. And again, I want to go back to that a little too, because like I said, after World War II, you had the positivity and the desire to rebuild and all of that, and the artistic expressions that it took on in those decades. First in the 50s with rock and roll and all that, and cruising in those Amcar, as we call them, American cars like the Chevy 57 or, whatever, the Cadillac 59. It was all part of that, and dancing and, whatever. I can't do it justice if I tried even, but it was a thing, and it had the power to transcend America. It came out to the world, like the music and everything. And even to this day, some people are still, in Sweden they call them raggare. In my country, I don't know if they ever had like a name, but people who dress and drive cars and behave like they're still in the 50s, like the style and the look of all of that, But the point is, that was the 50s, and then you had the 60s with the beatniks, which was, of course, the name I chose for my hangout, of course, since I had already picked the name Beat No Logic, and I knew already that people were going to refer to me as Beat. So I thought from the get-go, before I even had started building this in some kind of way, because, Jacksepticeye had the Septic Army and PewDiePie, and like I said, I'll repeat again what I said that time. Not that I think I'm PewDiePie or Jacksepticeye even, but I always had this idea from the get-go that if I'm going to have a group, they're going to have some kind of name called up after me, named after me. So it became the Beatniks, and I gave it a new meaning, like not referring to those people in the 60s, but Beatniks being then people who were aligned with or followers of Beat, meaning that. So, but again, I digress. The point is, you had the Beatniks, and they listened to jazz, and they were the start introduction of drugs got in there, and then of course the hippies, and I call myself a hippie as well. So because you gotta know, because more than anything, you couldn't compare the hippies to the 50s people. They are too far apart. But if you take the hippies, they were like basically the beatniks became the hippies, because it was just mostly a change of music, because the beatniks listened to jazz, and you know, with the music in the 70s becoming more funky, and you know, there were elements of jazz in it, and so it was a natural progression. But then after the hippies came the punks, and the punks became the mods, and the mods became new wave, and the new wave became the synths, or vice versa. I don't know, because in the 80s in particular there was so many different branches of, and all of this kind of kept going till the 90s, I would say. And even now you still have this categorizing and branching, but I don't care if you call yourself emo or goth. Like, to me, I'm sorry, this is gonna offend people. I know, but I don't care. I have to speak my mind. And to me, whether you call yourself emo or goth, you're part of a fucked up thing, because you're not even part of the original progression of things. You just invented something, and like South Park joked about it, what's the difference between an emo and a goth? Us who aren't either one, we wouldn't know, so shut the fuck up and move on. You know, you're not that important. And that whole thing came around the late 80s, early 90s, just when this thing started to end. This echo was starting to die off, like the dynamic of it, and now literally the people are starting to die off. And that's the thing. An idea or an expression of an idea, or a zeitgeist, as I was saying before, if you will, can never die off completely, but or let me rephrase that. Usually it doesn't die. Let me put it like that. Usually it doesn't die, but it diminishes over time, because it's like Pink Floyd said it in their expression of it, their contribution to these decades, their contribution to the echo. And they actually have an album called Echoes. I mean, come on, are you kidding me? It's all out there if you just pay attention. But they had this line, I wish, like I said, I never use a script, so that's why if there's certain information like that, factual information that I need to include, I wish I had a script many times, because then details like that, I kind of lost my own thread with that. But yeah, like I said, usually it doesn't die. The idea usually stays on, but it diminishes. But oh yeah, now I remember, because they literally have a line in one of their songs, not from Echoes, because obviously Echoes is like a compilation thing, but in one of the other albums, and I believe that song might be on there too, I'm not sure, but on one of the Pink Floyd albums there's a song, it's on the Wall album, and it says, after some stagger and fall, after all it's not easy banging your heart against some mad bugger's wall. And that ties into the agenda, because if you think in a different way and raise your kids in a different way, you live a different way, you have different ideals like that, like for example when this thing with the yuppie age happened, if you then were a person not thinking in terms of money, that's all fine and dandy, but how's that going to help you when the bank does a foreclosure on your house? You see what I'm saying? So it's like the humanitarian way of thinking versus capitalism, which is always going to be the humanitarian losing. So, like I said, that time things started to change. The little man wasn't as important anymore as they used to be. And I'm getting a little bit hoarse now, and even though it might seem counterproductive, I'm going to pause again, and I'm going to roll up a smoke, because I really need to smoke now, and I'm going to try to connect the headset too so I can be hands-free, so you won't be able to see my face anymore, but you've seen me quite a bit already now, so you know who's already talking if you came here from the start. And you should know already by just being part of this channel anyway. But yeah, also another thing, I know I need a shave, I know I need a haircut, so that's well established. Don't worry about that. No need to point that out. But I'm gonna pause a little bit again. I'm gonna roll one up, and then I come back and I'll talk to you and keep talking and smoking even. So just give me a couple of seconds and I'll be right back. Okay. Okay, I'm back. Yeah. And I hate getting long breaks like that because, I mean, you guys won't be able to tell, but it does throw you off from your last thread where you were speaking. But like I said, this is one where I try to cover all bases. So regardless, I'm going to go back and forth because I want to try and cover as much as I can, because even if I might be jumping back and forth, I think if I do try to get as much of my points in there as possible, I think it would be more interesting for you as well. But yeah, I was talking about the emos and the goths shortly before we I don't know what to call it, well, you know, before I took my little break to roll a smoke up, because I am a smoker, so obviously I want to smoke every now and then. But yeah, I haven't smoked much previously. I've only had one so far, I think. So, but yeah, it's interesting to bring up the very topic of emos or goths or whatever, you know, because they came around just about the same time as the so-called Woodstock 94. That's when they had really start popping up. And it's funny, they want to be so fucking unique, and yet they all wear the same fucking uniform. And that's the thing about me. Even me, I tend to wear a uniform in that sense, because I pretty much dress the same all the time. And now it's pretty boring, probably, but it's pretty normal, pretty average for someone my age. But the point about the emos and the goths, you know, it's an interesting one, because they show up exactly at the same time. So again, I don't hate on either one of them, but I'm just saying they're part of a fucked up cultural thing that's kind of hard to explain even. I mean, yeah, we do know that money, your relationship to money plays a big part of it, because, and I'm not saying the parent of that generation literally, but society at least had, and I mean, with the industrialized countries has always been capitalistic oriented anyway, but in the late 80s, or not late 80s, I keep saying late 80s, I don't know why, but, you know, mid 80s and onward, it's like a meltdown of values, you could say. And the fall of values, I directly link to that, like the whole thing where greed came into play. Like, I literally hold that responsible for a lot of the negative effects that's caused by it in this mechanism, in this zeitgeist that we're in now. And like I said, when our parents die, it's going to be really bad, because they were the ones who taught us, partially at least, taught us the, how can I say, some of the things connected to the Age of Innocence, the echo, you know, because they were very much a part of it. Like my mother, she was, let's see, I want to make sure, I want to count a little bit to make sure I'm not saying something that's completely stupid of me to say, but let's see, 50s, 70s. So yeah, she was about 20 when the 70s kicked off, you know, 20 something, 22 maybe, I believe. So she would definitely be in the hippie category. And so, yeah, but the thing is, unfortunately, only a few years later, I'm the youngest, so she was quite the young mother. So in a sense, she was not as big a part of it as some of those who didn't have children, but of course the only ones that did, they usually had their kids later on, so problems with that too. I won't go into that too much because, like I said, I'm not a parent myself. But when it comes to those who's 5 or 10 years younger than me and their subsequent parents, it's a whole other story for some reason, because they think in a different way, they live in a different way, and of course not only greed played into it, but it got to the point where people just had to do what they had to do. They had to compromise, and it's part of life. I get that. Compromise is a part of life. But when you compromise to the level that you lose your ideals, that's a problem. So, you know, that's another thing that's affected our collective, that's the word I've been looking for throughout this video. Collective. The collective zeitgeist and the collective minds of the people have changed, and not for the better. So, like I said, it's going to be bad when our parent passes away, because if we are, as an example, if we as an individual is fucked up, you still have your parents and you can turn to them for that guidance, to have them, at least maybe in that case, put you back on the right track. But when they are gone and we are gone, the ones of us who actually did pick up on this, not, like I said to my mother, not because you raised me, because it's not so much, in my case, from her raising me that I have this, but it's actually more, for my case at least, I tend to think of it as how I think about things. And I've been thinking about things this way since I was 14 years old. So, again, that doesn't mean I'm better than anyone else, it just means I'm different than most. Because I've always had this way of thinking. And, of course, some of it probably comes from her raising me, I couldn't say. But since I feel for the most part I pretty much raised myself, I'm not convinced that I can give her all the credit. That's all I'm saying. So, but again, I gotta keep every one of these sections under 30 minutes. So I'm gonna take another break, and I'll be right back. So stay with me, stay tuned. And we're back again. Again, I hope you don't mind me smoking, because at least I'm not bothering you. I mean, I'm just smoking on camera, so if you find that a problem, then you really gotta look into yourself. But anyhow, moving on. Yeah, I don't know how I came to be that way, but like I said, I've been different my entire life in that sense. I've always thought in terms that go outside the norm in that sense. I've always asked the big questions. Even as a young guy, I had more questions than I had answers. So whenever I wondered about something, I did ask. And I tried to educate myself as much as possible. But a lot of these questions are, of course, existential questions. It's about who you are and who you want to be and everything in between. So, can I say that I have achieved everything I want? No. But can I say that I feel that I've learned a lot? Yes, I feel like I have. So, that's why I wanted to cover this topic, because it is an important one, and it's going to be an interesting experience to see what it's going to mean for us on a practical level, because like I said, it's literally happening now every day. And for me, it was just watching some random video and picking up on the fact that even Laura Branigan has died, and she wasn't roughly more than 50. So someone who's 60 or 70 like my mother is, we can't expect to have them around all the time. They might be gone next year or the year after that. Who knows? It's not for us to say. But when you look at that fact, and the ones who come after us, because like I said, they're not our kids, but they do think in a different way, they do act in a different way, they live in a different way, and you might get lucky once in a while and you have one that actually tells you the truth, but most of them actually, if I can give my opinion, they probably don't even want to talk about it because they actually know the score, but they want to, just like my mother in some cases, they'd rather stay in their little bubble and keep living. And I understand that too. Again, no judgment on that part from me at least. But I'm saying if there's going to be a change, we have to make it happen too. And again, I'm not talking about my generation because we're now at the point where we hardly can influence the outcome of society in that sense anymore. But I wish we could, and I wish the next generation would hear what I'm saying and understand what's going on and make that change, because for me it's a shame that it's dying. That's only my 2 cents, but that's how I feel about it. It's a shame that we are heading in this direction and no one seems to raise an eyebrow over it. Because the only way to get there, in my opinion, is by acknowledging those facts and at least trying to make a change if we can, because they're going to be in charge. And I don't mean at the highest level of government or something like that, but they're going to be running things. They're going to be sitting in those offices, working and how can I say, influencing policies being changed and all of that stuff. So if they're at a loss, and I mean, this is an interesting fact because, and I hope you guys who's watching this, as well as in the comments, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it was my generation that was called Generation X, and I would include those people who are 5 to 10 years younger than me, even, because that's what it is. We are at a loss because that whole thing is dead now. The like Woodstock 94 is such a good example of that. Hang on a second. Woodstock 94 is such a good example of that because you can make everything happen on the outside. And now I'm just going to put my phone to the side here. So you're going to see my roof, but you're going to keep hearing me talking. So hope you don't mind. But I need to be hands-free because obviously I can't hold my phone all this time either. If I had a camera with a tripod, that would be a different story. But anyway, as I was saying, and only thing I got to remember now that I put it on the side here is to check the time every now and again, because I do want to cover this as best as I can, and I'm no professional in that sense. I didn't go to school for this, and I don't have a script, so it is what it is, but I'm going to try my best to cover what I think are important keys to understanding this mechanism, is at least, and also not only to understand the mechanism itself, but also combined with the agenda that's going on now. Because the agenda isn't one thing. The agenda is many things. And depending on what you believe, that plays into it as well too. Like, not whether or not you believe or not, but if you do believe, and I'm not talking about believing in some random thing, because obviously I have a faith too. But for me, that faith is also very specific. And if you have that specific faith, and I do mean a faith in the Bible and a faith in Christ, Christianity, then that religion is very clear on these things. Like, there is no other explanation, there is no other option in that, but that's one thing that's part of the agenda now. The agenda, as an example, I'll use Oprah as a good example, would say to you, any individual out there, every road leads to God, when the Bible actually says something along the lines of only through Jesus can you come to God. So when you are a part of that faith, it becomes a difficult thing. It becomes a problem knowing that the world says do what you want as long as it's not the God of the Bible or Christ. They also use the whole alien thing, the alien gospel as it's called, to further that point, because of course they created us. That's the whole idea behind that part of it. Transhumanism is another one, delving into the old story from the Bible where the devil said to Adam and Eve, first and foremost Eve, oh, that's not the case. You're not going to die if you eat this fruit. You in fact going to just become wise. Your eyes will be opened and you will see things as they truly are. The doors of perception will be opened. And as much as this upsets any Christian listening, the devil didn't lie about that. Our eyes were opened. But also, with that came us also tapping into what I would say the original sin part thing, you know. We are born with original sin since Adam and Eve, but when that happened, it was a major game changer, you know. It was a big thing that affects us very much every day. And I'm not going to go into this whole trying to convince you to believe, because that's not my job with this. That's not my point of this video. But I'm saying, if our parents are gone, and you can use the word parent in a bigger way here too, because not only are our parents dying off physically, our parents dying in that sense, but our proverbial parent, there are two of them, our mother, Mother Earth, and Father God, we have killed them off pretty much. Like, we are doing our best to kill the planet, which have those consequences, but also through this attitude that's being projected in this agenda, it's also do as thou wilt, which means do whatever you want as long as it's not following God, you know. That's another thing that's going to lead to problems. So I just want to mention that real quick, just to put it in perspective when it comes to faith. So, but yeah, our parents are dying, and for me, I was watching this video, I see the fact that Laura Branigan has passed away, and it was a few years ago, actually, quite a few years ago, and it made me think about, and I do think about this quite a bit because I know it's coming. My mother will come to pass, and if you are 40 something, your mother will come to pass and your father will come to pass, just as my father has already passed away. And when that happens, we no longer have those people who, even more than us, was part of the echo, part of the age of innocence. Because, like, if you go back to my mother's generation, when she was born, it was even more innocent than what we are now. So basically, in another way, I could say this video could also be called the loss of innocence. And when you lose something, it's always replaced by something else. And in this case, we lost our innocence, hence my referring to the fall in the Garden of Eden, but it's always replaced by something. And in this case, we lost our innocence and we replaced it with greed and false beliefs and false ideals, and or lack of ideals in total. Because, like I said, believing in nothing is a belief in itself now. And that's why I referred to earlier when I said if you actually come across someone who's honest, they'll actually say, it's like I had this one guy, I'll tell you another example. I had this one guy come to me and say, and this is a 19-year-old guy, and he said, "Isn't?" And I wasn't saying anything along the lines to make him like back me up just because I have these beliefs. It wasn't like a conversation where we were already talking about the topic and he was just agreeing with me. No, he said this unsolicited, like by himself. He said this, like he had apparently had some experiences in his young life already where it was enough to the point where he said, it's not getting any better, it's getting worse. So when you have a 19-year-old guy in front of you basically saying, without saying the actual words, I feel no hope for the future, you know where we're heading. And this is the generation I'm talking about. The people who are now, because of course this was quite a few years ago, well, not quite a few, but at least some years ago, they are at least 5 to 10 years younger, and in some cases even more. But I'm telling you, yeah, it's going to be bad when our parents goes away, because we don't have that backbone as they represent to turn to in that time. And especially it depends on how the world situation plays out in front of you too. How much are you going to need that extra support or not? Because it wouldn't be too much of a problem if it's good times, but if it's bad times, you would like that support to be there. So that's just a simple fact, simple logic. But when my generation is gone, it's going to be even worse, because there are not even then someone who has seen a little from that good thing we had going from the 50s into the 60s and 70s and a little bit into the 80s before mankind changed. So we are not even going to be around to teach, because like I said, it's not a completely black picture. It's not all bad. There are some good people who are younger too. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying for those who aren't, which is of course the majority, then there would be no one left to teach them other ways, to teach them a new perspective, to teach them a new attitude, and also, very important part of it, having that whole creative expression, because that was a major part of it. All those decades that I referred to, they had some kind of artistic expression and a certain name that went along with it. And like the guy said, in South Park, they make a joke of it. They especially Cartman, he has this how do you call it? Not adversity, but aversion. I think it's aversion. Correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. But he has this disgust, for lack of a better word, he has this disgust for what he calls hippies. Why? Why is that present in something, again, that started out, I believe, in the 90s? So how come that ever since the 90s, because I mean it did start mid to late 80s, yeah, sure, but the expression of it in society were more clear and present, visibly seen since the 90s. And like I said, that whole Woodstock 94 is just a very good example of that, trying to recreate something that was really cool originally, but it was just a fake thing. Like, you can make everything else happen, like the organizational part of it, like making the festival happen and getting all the bands and artists to come. But what's the point in doing that when the dynamic within the people that drove the first Woodstock to what it became, when that's gone, what's the point of even creating the festival in 94? Because in the 90s it was all about, if you don't mind me saying, it became more about negativity and greed and and grunge, musically speaking, and not being able to actually even hear what the people were singing when they were singing. So I don't know. It's one of those things. And I'm sorry I'm doing a crap job at putting my finger on it, because that's the thing. It's not an easy thing to put your finger on. But I can just tell you, it's very bad. And I only hope that the few that are like that within that bracket of age bracket of people have enough power within themselves to actually influence their peers, you know. I sincerely hope that, because then change is possible. But as of now, the thing is, in majority speaking, because like I said, this applies to the majority of them, they feel just as lost as I did when I realized that thing is practically dead. That spirit within people. And not just in their respective country or region, but globally. Like, that thing is dying. And like I said, when I was reading these comments, not only about Laura Branigan, but some other things that was in the comments too, like supposedly in the 90s, even how a music CD is made in a way, because it actually was pretty good at one point, and that was the end of it. Late 80s, mid 90s, that 10 years there marked a peak of a new medium, at the same time while it brought its technical understanding and implementation of it to its peak, making it very good, and then the quality just dropped because we got I don't know if the right word, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the word is complacent. We settled. And of course, for some people like me, I'm unfortunately in one of those categories, even though my age would indicate otherwise. I'm dependent on the system, so it's strange what you get used to, you know. So I understand it from a human perspective standpoint. I understand it fully. But does that mean that I respect that standpoint even within myself? No, I wish there was more I can do. But like I said, unfortunately now, for those of us who are in that age, we are too old. And if you haven't gotten into a place of position already to do something about it, where you could actually influence it on a higher level, the train has left the station, so to speak. So now it's up to those people, that generation. And I seriously doubt that they are up for the task as a majority, because like I said, there are some good people within that age bracket too, don't get me wrong. But are they enough, or have enough push to actually move the rest of them, the majority, in that direction, where things are done for the real reasons, not just because you have to? Like, I talked to a woman who was in that age bracket. She was roughly 10 years younger than me, I would say, something like that. And we got into this discussion about doing what you would like to do in terms of professionally speaking. And first she came up with this argument that that she was really happy. But then, given what she actually said, turned out she told on herself. Basically, it was too funny, because she basically later on in the conversation admitted, in a way, not directly of course, because who would in that situation, but just through her own words, in a way admitted that she did what she had to do for work because she has to put food on the table for herself. And in the case, not that she had kids at the time, but if the case were that she had kids, you need to support yourself and your would-be family if you have one. So she basically proved my entire point, which was that if you could actually come to the situation where you're actually doing what you would like to do, and not only what you would like to do, but something that you're good at, something that you enjoy, and that you actually can do really well, then you're going to have more plus days than minus days. That was my point to her. But then, like I said, only 2 or 3 back and forth goings in the conversation, her response basically revealed that I was right. My point was valid. Because she worked as a bartender at the time. And that's the thing. I remember just being in the shop earlier, not earlier today because this is a new day and all, but last time I was in the shop, yesterday, I came to think about this guy that used to work here, and I haven't seen him in a while, and I was thinking about asking this new guy who's there, does so-and-so still work here? But then I realized, nah, for one, the new guy might not even know, for one, and secondly, like, what's the point if the guy isn't working there anymore? What's the difference, Because he's not gonna... who would want... Like, any person who wants to move ahead, professionally speaking, like in terms of school or work, they wouldn't stay working in a shop as a clerk, if you will. I use the term clerk loosely because I don't know if it's the correct term when you're talking about a shop like that, a food shop, but in retail, who would want to work in retail? I mean, I'm sure there's some who do, and I don't want to dump on them either. I'm just saying most people, they do have a dream, and that's the whole thing this video is about. There used to be people who dreamed, and now we just do what we have to do because we have no other choice. We have to, like, this whole capitalism thing has gotten so far, it's pushed us up into the corner, We have no choice. We have to do what we have to do, and it's the same for me too, even though I'm on welfare. I don't like being in that situation, but I honestly think and feel there's not much I can do about it now because I'm too old. And my body's giving me problem too, and that's another factor, so. But yeah. It's gonna be an interesting time ahead of us. I honestly mean that. And it's gonna be difficult times. I honestly think that too. But it's gonna be interesting to see where we go from here. Because, like I said, this is the time when those who come after us will really have to step up in order for this world and its people to move on. Anyway, I don't want to drag on for too much longer. I wish I could have done a better job of outlining this whole thing for you guys. But like I said, I don't use a script. I just go from the top of my head and I try to include as much points as I can along the way. And I hope you got something from it, because like Sash said it in that song, that's really one of my... It's more new music actually, and it's funny, it's actually from the 90s, but that one line, it says it all perfectly. Real, and I would assume that lyric would have a question mark after the first time the word real is mentioned, but it says probably real question mark, nothing is real, in a world of illusion, you only see what you feel. So since the feeling has gone, and we're moving into that time now, the feeling is gone and the people are dying, and it's going to be bad when they are gone, but it's going to be even worse when we move on to the next plane, whatever that is. So think about it for a couple of minutes, and if you like what I'm trying to convey in this video, leave a like on this video, or if you don't, click the dislike. It's fine either way. But I just wanted to talk about this for a little bit and see how you guys feel about this, and especially if you are in your 40s. This should refer to you, you know. So this is Mythnologic signing out, saying thank you for listening and taking the time. And until I see you next time, have a good one. And peace, everyone.